Krishna Mahamantra ki.
Yes, which one?
Canto 6.
Oops. I just actually I don't have any English.
No English?
Yeah, but I can bring computer and we can.
Okay. Does somebody have their phone I can use? Maybe?
Sorry?
Maybe they have a phone they can use. Yeah.
Which canto? Which chapter?
The last chapter is 19 and text number 5. Okay, this is a verse from the very last chapter in the 6th canto. And this is called the performing the Pamsuvana ritualistic ceremony, and this was being done by Diti, who was trying to perform a particular ceremony in order to create a personality that would kill Indra. Number 5. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tejasa Mahimanjasa Justa Ista Guna Sarvais Tito Sri Bhagavan Prabhu. Translation. O my Lord, because you are endowed with causeless mercy, all opulence, all prowess, and all glory, strength, and transcendental qualities, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of everyone. Interesting purport here. In this verse, the word Tato Sri Bhagavan Prabhu means, therefore, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everyone. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is endowed with all 6 opulences and full, and moreover, he is extremely kind to his devotees. Although he is full in himself, he nonetheless wants all living entities to surrender unto him, so they may engage in his service. Thus he becomes satisfied. Although he is full in himself, he nonetheless becomes pleased when his devotee offers him patra pushpam toyam, a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water in devotion. Sometimes the Lord, as the child of Mother Yasoda, requests his devotee for some food, as if he were very hungry. Sometimes he tells his devotee in a dream that his temple and his garden are now very old, and that he cannot enjoy them very nicely. Thus he requests the devotee to repair them. Sometimes he is buried in the earth, and as if unable to come out himself, he requests his devotee to rescue him. Sometimes he requests his devotee to preach his glories all over the world, although he alone is quite competent to perform the task. Even though the Supreme Personality of Godhead is endowed with all possessions yet is self-sufficient, he depends on his devotees. Therefore, the relationship of the Lord and his devotees is extremely confidential. Only the devotee can perceive how the Lord, although full of himself, depends on his devotee for some particular work. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, 11:33, where the Lord tells Arjuna, Nimita matram bhava seva sachim. O Arjuna, merely be an instrument in the fight. Lord Krishna had the confidence to win the battle of Kurukshetra, and nonetheless, he induced his devotee Arjuna to fight and become the cause of victory. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was quite confident enough to spread his name and mission all over the world, but still he depended on his devotee to do this work. Considering all these points, the most important aspect of the Supreme Lord's self-sufficiency is that he depends on his devotees. This is called his causeless mercy. The devotee who has perceived this causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by realization can understand the Master and the Supreme. Jnana Krishna Salaka Chakshya Mudita Asma Shri Namo Om Vishnu Saraya Krishna Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Jai Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. So this is a very interesting purport, but it reflects the translation so nicely, that the Lord is all powerful. He has all opulences. Otherwise, how can we understand that the Supreme Lord is the Supreme if he's unable to do something? He's fully competent to do anything. Prabhupada said, the Lord is so powerful that he can change day into night and night into day. It's inconceivable by our limited understanding. But in other words, the point is, he is all powerful, therefore he can do anything, anywhere, at any time. But when he wants to do something, he does it through his devotee. Why? Because he wants his devotee to get the credit. Although he supplies the ingredients, and he supplies the intelligence and the ability, the devotee carries it out, and the devotee gets the credit. The Lord likes to glorify his devotee, as it's illustrated in this particular purport, Prabhupada indicates. The Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, was able to spread Krishna consciousness all over India. And devotees did ask him, his disciples, well, why didn't he just take it around the world since he was here? He did it in India. And Prabhupada very humbly responded, he left it for me to do. So it is an example of the Lord, how he works. He wants his devotees to get glorified and also purified, because the act purifies the devotee and also gives the devotee some glory, and Krishna likes that when his devotee is glorified. Although everything is coming from him. And therefore in the Bhagavad Gita he says, Rasaham apsakunseya, Prabhaspi Samsuyena, Pranavasan Vedeshu, Sabdike Purusham Yeshu. Sabdike Purusham Yeshu means that I am the ability in all living entities. whatever abilities we have, we may think, oh, well, that's my ability. But if Krishna wants, he can remove that in a second. And if Krishna wants, he can increase it unlimitedly. And Krishna is that ability in all of the entity because he is the supreme power and the supreme controller of all. But here, one of the most amazing points in this verse is that although he is full of opulences, he's all beautiful, he's famous, he's the richest, he's the strongest, he's the wisest, and he's also the most renounced. He has another quality that's mentioned here. He's kind. God is kind. So when you think about it, you can think about it in a material way. If you know someone who is wealthy or has a good position in society or is able to influence other people, but he's not kind, then who cares? In other words, the kindness quality of the Lord really brings out the attractive feature of the Lord. Although the Lord has all these good qualities, and you'll see some of these in small minority points in us, the living entities. Some devotees have beauty, some devotees they're intelligent, others have developed some fame, others are quite strong. And again, using that same analogy, if a person has these qualities, but they're not kind, nobody really cares. Just like rich people, sometimes rich people, they attract people not because of their personality, but because they have money. People come around them because they get something from them. For example, we have the story in the 11th canto of the Avanti Brahmin. Avanti Brahmin was a very, very wealthy merchant, but he was cruel. And people stayed with him because he was wealthy. He was also quite miserly, so they would try to get whatever they could. But he was also very, what we say, stingy, miserly, and he was cruel at the same time. But people stayed with him because he was wealthy. But what happened at one point, by the will of providence, he lost all his wealth. And as soon as he lost all his wealth, all his family members gave him up, all his friends gave him up, everyone gave him up, and he was all alone. So, from this example, in the Bhagavatam, we can understand, although people came around and tried to make friends with him, they weren't interested in him, they were interested in what he had to give. And because there was nothing personal about their relationship with him, when he lost everything, they said, well, what's the use? So they gave him up. So you see Krishna, although he has all of these qualities, and he needs nobody, he's kind. He's very kind. Give you an example of one story in the Shastras, which is quite interesting. When Krishna was in Dwarka, he had to go to a meeting of all of the leaders in Dwarka, and they had to discuss some of the social and political affairs of Dwarka, how to manage. So King Yudhisthira was also there, and the battle of Kurukshetra had just finished, and Yudhisthira was now ready to be installed on the throne. But before that could happen, there had to be what is called a Rajasuya sacrifice. Now this sacrifice consummates or brings all of the other subordinate kings under the care of the one king and acknowledges this king as the king of the world. So in order to take that position, he had to perform this very costly a very lengthy sacrifice, which takes about 2 years to do. Now, Yudhisthira was ready to begin the procedure for the Rajasuya sacrifice. And he had asked Krishna, Krishna, you should be the person that we honor the most in this sacrifice. So please be our guest of honor. And Krishna agreed. So now they were all in Dwarka, and they were having a meeting. Yudhisthira was there, all the leaders were there, Krishna was there. And while the meeting was going on, a messenger came to the door of the assembly house, and there was a guard by the door, and he approached the guard, and he was quite in anxiety. He said, I have a very important, urgent message for Krishna. And so the guard notified that Krishna, there is a messenger here, he has an urgent message. Should we read the message to you? And Krishna turned and said, yes. So then the messenger came forward, and it was a letter written by the kings who had been imprisoned by Momasura. He had imprisoned all of these kings. He had taken their possessions, thrown them in jail, and taken all their wives. This was Jarasandha, a very powerful demon at the time. And so it was a plea from these kings to Krishna, save us. We are in a very difficult situation. He's going to sacrifice us to one of the goddesses, and we will be part of a human sacrifice. We need your help to save our lives. And they were, in the letter, they were begging Krishna for help. So the letter was read, and Krishna's listening. Now, we know Krishna knows what to do because there was a conflict. The conflict was the Rajasuya sacrifice should begin immediately. And now, at the same time, this urgent plea from these kings came up. What to do? Should we do something to save the kings first, or should we go ahead with the Rajasuya sacrifice? So Krishna turns to Uddhava, his cousin. Now, Uddhava is a very dear devotee of Krishna, very intimate relationship. Uddhava is the cousin of Krishna, as Krishna's father was Vasudeva. Vasudeva had many brothers, and one of the brothers was the father of Uddhava. So Uddhava and Krishna were cousins. But Uddhava was also a very intimate devotee of Krishna. He was one of the most advanced devotees of Krishna. It says that just below the gopis of Vrindavan, Uddhava ranks as one of the best of the devotees. Very deep in devotional service. An intimate friend of Krishna. So Krishna turns to Uddhava and says, what should we do? And then Uddhava, he stops, thinks for a while, and he comes and he says, my dear Lord, obviously we cannot perform the Rajasuya sacrifice as long as Jarasandha is still alive. First you have to kill Jarasandha, free the kings, and then only then the Rajasuya sacrifice will be successful. Everyone, Jai, Uddhava, brilliant idea. Even Yudhisthira thought, yes, of course, this is natural. Without Jarasandha living, we cannot actually say that we can conquer all areas of the world. We must rid the world of this demon, Jarasandha. And so everyone applauded Uddhava. Uddhava was perfect. And Krishna was smiling. Now the point was, Krishna knew what to do. He knows everything. But he opted to Uddhava. You figured it out. And Uddhava came up with a solution. And therefore Uddhava got all the credit. Krishna could have said the same thing, and he would have, but he didn't. Because he wanted to give his devotee the credit. So here again is another indication of how Krishna loves his devotees so much that even he will break his promise in order to protect his devotees. And we have the example in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, when Bhishma Dev. Now Bhishma Dev is a very powerful general. And Bhishma Dev, he was fighting against Krishna. So you might ask, why did Bhishma Dev, who was a great devotee of Krishna, take the side against Krishna? Well, there's two reasons. One of the reasons was something quite obvious, and the second reason is a very hidden reason, and it's the real reason, actually. The hidden reason is the deep reason. And what is that? Well, Bhishma Dev was being maintained by Duryodhana. Duryodhana, of course, was the leader of the Kurus against the Pandavas and fighting against Krishna and Arjuna. And so, Duryodhana was very expert at getting the people to do what he wanted him to do by giving them all kinds of gifts, by giving them positions, by giving them like to take care of them. Like Karna didn't have any place to go; he was considered to be an outcast, and he gave Karna some service as a kshatriya. So Duryodhana really didn't care so much about the people, but he wanted to use people by bribing them in different ways. So he did that with Bhishma Dev. He took care of Bhishma nicely. Bhishma Dev felt obliged to help Duryodhana. So when he was requested to fight, he agreed. Now, Bhishma Dev on the side of the Kurus, the Pandavas have no chance to win. It's not possible. Bhishma Dev was the most powerful warrior on the entire battlefield. And he also had a benediction. He could only die when he wanted to. Amazing benediction, huh? Pretty good.
Yeah.
He could only die only when he wanted to die. And that's a long story how he got that benediction. So I won't mention that story now because that goes back to his early part of his life. But he was given that benediction, you will only die when you want. And he was 170 years old when he was on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he was so powerful that he could immediately eliminate the entire Pandava army. It wasn't possible. No one could fight against Bhishma Dev. He was such a warrior. And but he wasn't fighting to his capacity. And Duryodhana noticed that and said, you know, my dear grandfather Bhishma Dev, I can see you have very much affection for the Pandavas and you're not fighting to your capacity. And that's an insult to a kshatriya. When a kshatriya is being told they're not fighting to their capacity, it's like, you know, it's really an insult. So Bhishma Dev got quite upset hearing that. He said, all right, tomorrow I will annihilate all the Pandavas and the armies. He was determined. And then Duryodhana said, all right, I have 5 arrows here. And tomorrow I'll give you these 5 arrows, and then you can use them against the 5 Pandavas. Agreed. And so he told Duryodhana, you hold the 5 arrows, and tomorrow I'll get those 5 arrows from you. Now Krishna's thinking, now if Bhishma Dev comes on the battlefield with those 5 arrows, there's no chance for Pandavas. Arjuna's finished. So I have to do something. So he called Arjuna. He said, Arjuna, remember Duryodhana made a promise? He said, anytime you want to ask any benediction from him, you can ask. Because you did him a favor and now he wants to reciprocate. So now there is a chance. So now you go to Duryodhana and you ask him for those 5 arrows. And then so Arjuna goes, because during the day they would fight like vicious enemies, but at night they would have camp together and both sides would sit and talk and joke and get a little intoxicated. That's what kshatriyas do anyway. They drink. They don't get drunk, but they just drink. And so they're sitting there friendly, and Duryodhana is sitting there, and Arjuna said, "My dear Duryodhana, don't you remember you offered me a benediction?" "Yes, whatever you want, of course, that's my promise." "You want the battle? You want to wait? You want the war to end?" "No. What do you want?" "I want those 5 arrows you're holding for Bhishma." And he had no choice. He had given his promise. Because for a Kshatriya to give a promise and say no, it's like worse than death. Better to give up your life than give up your promise. So he immediately gave him the 5 arrows. The next day, Bhishma understood this is the trick of Krishna. So then he came on the battlefield and he was fighting like to his capacity. And the Pandava army was being destroyed. And Arjuna was on the chariot, and then it was Arjuna between Arjuna and Bhishma. And Bhishma was smashing arrows, and Arjuna's chariot was falling apart. The wheel fell off. Krishna fell off the chariot. And Arjuna was about to be killed. So Krishna had promised, "I'll be your charioteer, but I'm not going to fight. That's my promise. I'll be there to drive your chariot, but I'm not going to fight." But now Krishna saw there was no choice. Either his devotee will be killed or he has to break his promise. So Krishna decided to break his promise. And he picked up the chariot wheel, and you can see the picture. He was so angry at Bhishma that he's running with him with the chariot wheel over his head. Krishna's eyes are red, bright red. His charter is flying in the wind and it falls off while he's running. And he leaves it on the ground and he just keeps charging. Bhishma is thinking, "God, my life is perfect now. My dream has been fulfilled. Krishna will fight with me." And because that's his relationship with Krishna. It's one of the 12 relationships with the Lord is chivalry, to fight with the Lord. And so it was a beautiful fight, and when Bhishma was shooting arrows and it was hitting the body of Krishna, they were like love bites by a lover, as described by the acharyas. Who made that statement? Vishwanath? No, not Vishwanath Chakravarti. Sridhar Swami said that. Yeah. It's like Krishna was accepting those arrows like the love bites of a lover. And then, of course, at that time, Arjuna came in and started firing arrows at Bhishma. And Bhishma was then put into distress, not distress, but his whole body was covered with arrows by Arjuna. But because he had the benediction of not to die until he wanted to die, he laid on the battlefield with his body saturated with arrows, so he was still completely conscious. And at that time, he gave instructions to Yudhisthira on how to rule the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful story in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But the point we wanted to illustrate in this particular part of the Bhagavatam is that Krishna will make himself look bad if he has to protect his devotees. Because people will say, you can't trust Krishna. He says one thing and he does something else. Now, Ramchandra, Lord Ramachandra, he's not like that. He says what he's going to do. Whatever he says, he does. But Krishna's tricky. He says, I'm not going to fight, and he fights. What else did he say? There's another incident. He says, I didn't steal the butter, but he did. So he lies. And his cane, if you see Krishna's cane, I don't know if you have it here, it's crooked. His cane is crooked. Can't trust him. Because what he's actually saying is that the higher religious principle is that his devotee is more important than his reputation. And that's the message of this particular pastime. So that, of course, illustrates the point of the verse that The Lord always wants to give protection to his devotees and give glorifications to his devotees. And because he does ultimately everything. As we mentioned, he says, I am the ability of all living entities. So Vasyacha Hamriti Sadhu Visto, Matas Sritam Agyan Ahopohanam Cha. Agyan Pohanam Cha. I give knowledge, I give remembrance, and if you want to forget, I help you forget also. So knowledge comes from Krishna, remembrance comes from Krishna, forgetfulness comes from Krishna. If Krishna wants you to forget something, you can't remember your name. That happened to me once. I was feeling real proud one day, and Krishna gave me a little message and said, you think you're so great, huh? Well, here. And the next minute, I couldn't remember who I was. So that's Krishna. And so he's all powerful. And what he does is that he always acts on behalf of his devotee. So that's the beauty of the relationship. And as this verse illustrates, this is a very confidential relationship between the devotee and the Lord. The Lord does everything and gives credit to his devotee, and the devotee wants to glorify the Lord, and the Lord wants to glorify the devotee. This is, as Prabhupada used to say, what can you give with Krishna with 2 hands that he's holding in 10 hands? And what can you hold in 2 hands that he's taken away with 10 hands? So Krishna, he can give everything and he can take everything away. So when we learn that, then we say, well, what else? What better master is there? Krishna. There's no one else. Because the Krishna, he always works for the benefit of his devotee. And that relation is very intimate. So the devotee always thinks how to serve Krishna, and Krishna is always thinking how to please his devotee, because the devotee is trying to please him, and Krishna is trying to make the devotee happy. That's a very sweet relationship, and it's illustrated in so many points throughout the scriptures. As he empowers his devotees to do wonderful things, and they get the credit, and he remains in the background. That's Krishna. So this verse is very instructive. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bhagavatam because it illustrates that the quality of kindness, which is a quality that attracts people in general. When somebody is kind, you're attracted to that person, even if they don't have any other good qualities about them. The quiet kindness principle is something that is very attractive. It really reflects the essence of good qualities. The kind person will always act for the benefit of everyone else. The kind person will give up their own comforts in order to make another person comfort. That's the nature of kindness, how kindness works. It works in such a way as if I can do something to benefit another person, even if I have to sacrifice something for myself, then that's my happiness. That's my happiness. So that's one of the qualities of the devotees. It's mentioned in the Shastras, the 26 qualities of the devotees. And then of the 26, the foremost quality is kindness. That's mentioned first as number 1. And so how does that kindness play itself out? It does in different ways. But one of the ways is to help another person become Krishna conscious. Or give the mercy of Krishna to another person. Because when you give Krishna to another person, that's what they need the most. When they get Krishna, or at least they get their relationship with Krishna, then whatever problems they have, they can easily solve. And as that relationship develops, then the problems automatically disappear. Whatever problems we have, is simply a lack of our Krishna consciousness. As we increase our Krishna consciousness, our problems diminish more and more. And pretty soon, there's no problem. But then the devotee has another problem. how can I give Krishna consciousness to others? And that becomes a problem. And that problem is not a real problem. It's called the burden of love, where love becomes the principle, and where a devotee is thinking how to give Krishna consciousness to others. So you might think, well, what is my position? How much do I know? How advanced am I? That doesn't have anything to do with it. It means that whatever you know, or how much you know, or whatever little bit you can understand, use it to somehow help others. And when it's done with kindness, even the smallest amount of Krishna conscious knowledge brings the greatest amount of benefit for that person. Because the elixir is the element of concern. Just like when someone sees that they're concerned about you, you actually open up to that person automatically. When it's genuine, and you can see that, that's something that cannot be hidden or covered by some kind of activity. When it's done naturally, then it becomes obvious and that person becomes attractive automatically. So Krishna uses his devotees in the same way to give his mercy to others. And therefore he says, whatever you give to others, you also gain from that. In material life, if you have some money and you give it to someone, that's how much less you have. But that's material. In Krishna consciousness, if you give knowledge, if you give your time, if you give your energy, whatever you give in relationship to Krishna, it comes back and it grows. If you give your time, you get more time. If you give your knowledge, you get more. If you give your resources, you also get more. That's how Krishna consciousness works, because spiritual expands where material diminishes. Whenever we offer in material life goes down, therefore we need to get more, but in the spiritual life, you become full. At the same time, you're never empty. Even when you try to empty, you remain full. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Because it's how spiritual life works. The more you serve, the more you want to serve. The more you give, the more you're inclined to give. Because there is a reciprocation, not necessarily by the person you give to, but by Krishna. It's coming from Krishna. Therefore, he keeps filling his devotee with more of the same thing that the devotee gives. It's Krishna. So this is one of the features of Krishna consciousness, that Krishna loves his devotees so much. If we can remember how much, we can't really understand how much Krishna loves his devotees. Because he's the best in all categories. So we maybe understand, well, what is the love on this level? And there's some understanding. But when you apply it to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is the source of love, that is the reservoir of the ocean of all love. And so just a drop of that love is enough to satisfy the devotee completely and perfectly. That's Krishna. That's Krishna. And how he shows his love for his devotee in different ways. He gives them protection, gives them intelligence, and he also gives them the understanding how best to serve him. That's Krishna. That's good. So my point is, Krishna's everything. And it's not some eulogy or some idea. These are examples in the scriptures and also in examples in day-to-day life. One who has surrendered fully to Krishna will understand there's nothing more that I need than Krishna. Krishna's everything. So how do we surrender to Krishna? There we go. And of course, the easiest and most direct way, which awakens all other avenues of surrender, is to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, And not just chant, but chant with a desire to please Krishna, a desire to offer your devotion to Krishna, and chant as much as you can. Quantity helps to build quality. Just like we say, the more you practice at something, the better you get at the activity you're trying to practice. Devotional service is the same thing, especially chanting. The more you chant, the more you practice chanting, the better you get at the chanting. And as it increases, then all other avenues of devotional service become natural and easy. Why? Because you're not so much directed by your mind anymore. You're directed by Krishna. When you bring Krishna into your consciousness through the chanting, he's directing you. He's protecting you. He's inspiring you. He's doing everything, and you're thinking, I'm doing it. But that's how he works through the intelligence with his devotee. With a non-devotee, he does the same thing. But he gives them what they want. They want material sense gratification, so he gives them intelligence how they can go back in material sense gratification. But it's not for their benefit, and therefore they suffer because of that, and therefore he's simply fulfilling their desire. But for his devotee, he is inspiring the devotee in devotional service. And the devotee is happy because he knows it's simply taking shelter of Krishna. There's nowhere else to go. Krishna's everywhere. And this verse kind of illustrates that point. And that his kindness is all pervading. It's not just simply limited in one aspect of kindness. Kindness extends completely to whatever the devotee needs in all areas. Okay, so these are some things we can think about. And because the more you know about Krishna, the more you can develop your attraction for Krishna. Krishna is attractive, but that attraction comes by increasing our knowledge. When you know what Krishna is like, how he thinks, what he does, why he does what he does, how he interacts with devotees, how he kills the demons in order to benefit them. So when you know Krishna, then you start to understand everything. But it's not easy to know Krishna. In fact, it's very difficult. But if we want to know Krishna, Krishna will help us. He helps the devotee in that area. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Anything else? Any questions? What is your name? Ramhari.
So why does Krishna need our love if he's self-sufficient and complete?
Good question.
How come it sounds as if there is something missing in Krishna if he doesn't have that would be contrary to the
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Actually, the answer is both yes and no. One, no, that he's self-satisfied. But the second thing is the whole principle of existence is based on that element of love. So love is the source of love is the purpose of life. And love of Krishna is the ultimate principle of happiness. So Krishna wants to experience love with each and every devotee, or each and every soul, I should say, not devotee. Because each soul is unique. No two souls are the same on the spiritual level, just like no two people are the same on the material level. You see that. Just like they use the example, no two fingerprints are the same, no two voice sounds. Nobody has the exact same voice as someone else. There's always something different about the voice. Each of us are individuals on the material level, but on the spiritual level, we also are there. So that individual uniqueness, Krishna wants to taste it in his loving relationship with his devotee. So you might say he's greedy for you. That's true. He just wants to exchange love with as many living entities. And he also wants to benedict that person by that exchange, of course. The devotee becomes fully satisfied. Yes, yes. Is that enough? Does that answer your question?
Hare Krishna. My question is, what about evil? Why some people evil is called? I understand that everything comes from Krishna. But from where comes evil?
Okay. Is the sun the cause of darkness? Is the sun the cause of darkness? No. But what is darkness? Absence of the sun. Darkness has no standing of its own. Darkness is the absence of light. Evil is the absence of good. Or God. When you take good or God out of light, you get evil. So it's a shadow. It has no substance. That's all. So God didn't create evil, but those who want to remove God from everything, or remove all good qualities, they live in a world of darkness, which is like a world of shadows. There's nothing there. It's evil. Again, what's another example? What is cold? Huh? What is the absence of warmth, or the absence of heat? If you take heat completely out, you get 460 degrees Celsius, minus Celsius. That is absolute cold. There isn't an element of heat there. 460 degrees Celsius below zero. That is absolute coldness. So, therefore, but as soon as you put heat anywhere, then you see the temperature goes up. So cold is simply an absence of heat. Evil is the absence of God or goodness. Light and darkness is the absence of light. So evil has no substance. It's just the absence of the reality of God. That's all it is. One becomes evil or controlled by evil when they remove God from their life and then they start acting in the same way.
Can we understand that some people is not, perhaps he is evil, but maybe he is not evil from, all the time.
Right. So then just, he's evil up to a certain, it's all in degree too. Goodness is in degree. Evilness is also in degree. Just like coldness is completely at 460 minus zero. But if you go higher, you have little elements of heat in that coldness. Although it's hard to distinguish them. So yeah, there's no more, the more you reject God and try to exploit material nature and the living entities, the more you enter into the darkness of evil. And you can go lower and lower and lower and lower. It's like a demon. There are demons, but demons are not the evilest people. There are other forms of races like the yakshas and rakshasas. They're even more evil. Even I was talking to one devotee the other day. He was telling me, he was hearing that there's some demons in the world. They take little babies and then they smash their bodies up. And they drink the blood of these babies so they can have this good blood in their blood. And that gives them some kind of strength in their body because they want to take this fresh blood that's coming from babies, which is pure blood, it's not contaminated, and they drink it. There are people in the world like that today. This was just told to me 2 days ago by some devotees. No, I mean, that is really evil. Taking little babies and just mashing them up and drinking their blood. And there's even worse people than that. And so, yeah, they're so demoniac that there's no, there's nothing good about them. And then you have others who will sacrifice their life for the benefit of others. So you have the other side, persons who are completely selfless for the benefit of others. So the soul can go one way or the other. It's like you could have something very hot or something very cold. And it's up to the individual. They choose according to their choice, and by their choice, they develop the activities to fulfill that desire. Yeah. Well, there are very beautiful people in the world, and there are very horrible people in the world. Yeah. I saw another here. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
If you remember that darkness is the absence of light, evil is the absence of goodness. And it's just amazing you asked that question, because this Prabhupada was talking about that today in the lecture I was listening to. He was saying that I just answered the question according to what he told what I heard today. It's interesting you asked the question. Thank you for helping me remember the lecture. Yes. Vishal.
I have a small thought to clarify. You said that with more chanting, we actually do the quality of chanting. I was just reflecting on my early years when I was trying to chant more, I just get more annoyed with chanting. My mind places tricks and starts to feel distant from chanting. So how to understand this?
How do you feel now? You feel annoyed now?
No, it's
Okay, there you go. You make progress.
It's just temporary, I guess.
You just go and go, and you went through one phase and you came out of it. So the more you kept chanting, you didn't give up. There's the proof. Krishna. Something else? Another good one.
Well, I like to think, since I learned that everything is in a way the expansion of Lord's energies. I like to think and perceive everything which I see, especially in nature, as a wonderful creation of wonderful creator. And in that way I can see that you mentioned that it's difficult to become Krishna conscious, to be God conscious.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. And I find out that it's not so difficult, especially in nature. Flowers, fruits, vegetables, how they grow and everything. But this is one aspect of God consciousness, but this intimacy which you were explaining in the beginning related to the text, how Krishna is so kind to reciprocate very personally. And I think that somehow we can say that in every soul, this kind of God consciousness is inherited already in one way.
Which kind? The one about nature?
No, in every soul, we can say that God consciousness in some way inherited because we are part of that.
Right. Yeah.
But this, how to come to the position of having very close or intimate relationship, so that we can experience this for reading.
Well, I think that's explained. And it could be explained from a few different angles. But as you mentioned, God consciousness is, or Krishna consciousness, devotional. The devotional love is sitting in the heart of all living beings. It's there. But it comes out and it's revealed when we hear more about Krishna, when we chant Krishna's name, when we serve Krishna by serving Krishna's devotees. All of these things bring out that natural attraction because it pleases Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, he also reveals himself. But part of that revealing himself is that we become attracted to him. His name is Krishna, which means he's all attractive. But because we are covered to a certain degree by material energy, that attracting feature is not fully developed. There's something there. But the more we hear about him, the more we serve, the more we chant, the more we read, the more we distribute prasadam, all of these things awaken or remove the coverings of material energy. And then natural love for Krishna will start to manifest more and more. And Prabhupada says it over and over. God consciousness is not something you have to bring in. It's already there. You just have to bring it out by removing the material coverings. Hearing, Shravanam, Kirtan, Smaranam awakens that attraction. We get attracted to a person in this world because they have certain qualities, certain activities. In the same way, we get attracted to Krishna because his qualities, his activities, his relationships with devotees.
So can we say then that this closeness comes from our attraction to him?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm translating it to myself.
Yeah, completely. It's there. It's just revealed accordingly. Prabhupada would say, some of us are 50% Krishna conscious, some are 30%, some are 70, some are 90. So we might all be on different levels of attraction to Krishna. But that means everyone can go to 100%. That's the point. And that's mentioned, the more you hear about Krishna, the more you become attracted to Krishna. The more you become attracted to Krishna, the more you want to serve Krishna. The more you want to serve Krishna, the more you develop that relationship with Krishna. It's all connected to hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna.
Please, may I ask you a question? I speak sometimes. Is there any difference to learn more about a pure devotee? If we try to, for example, to learn more about Srila Prabhupada, pure devotee, his activities,
Right.
his teachings, is it
Same thing.
is it the same?
Yeah.
That's
Krishna, same thing. You get attracted to Krishna. The Prabhupada is reflecting Krishna on everything he does. So as you get attracted to Prabhupada more, you also get attracted to Krishna. Because Krishna, Prabhupada's here simply to give us Krishna. So not only do you get Prabhupada, but you get Krishna. You get both. And you can't think of Prabhupada separate from Krishna. He lives simply to give Krishna to others, and he whatever he does for himself is all about Krishna. It reminds me of one of the first devotees. His name was Hayagriva. And he came to Prabhupada one time. He said that, I had a dream, Prabhupada, one night. I saw Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And then the dream changed where Krishna became you and I became Arjuna. Prabhupada said, yes, there's no difference. Yes, I keep forgetting your name. Sham?
Prema Samputa.
Prema?
Samputa.
Prema Samputa. Prema Samputa. What does it mean?
Treasure box of Prema. Treasure box of Prema.
Treasure box of Prema.
I remember you had the same question. When Gurudev gave the name, I was like, what?
That means we have to open the box and there's more.
There's a nice book on that by Vishnu
Beautiful
Chakravarti.
story by Vishnu. Called Prema Samputa.
Look it up. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to be with your God brothers and God sisters for your Guru Maharaj's disappearance ceremony coming up in June in London.
Yeah.
Come.
Yeah, we'll try.
It's on the 18th of June. 6-hour program. You can meet all your God brothers and God sisters if you want. If you come, I'll pay your ticket.
Okay, Maharaj.
Yeah. I'll pay your flight ticket to London. So you have to pay to get back. Keep you there. But I will. You want to come? I'll be happy to meet you. Because maybe you know some of them.
Yeah.
Putu Bhavana is there. Chidi Shakti is there. Some of the other wonderful devotees are there. Okay, so now you can take something out of the treasure box and tell me what you want to ask.
You already answered my question. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the lecture, because what I understand from everything, it was all centered about love, bhakti. We did talk about a burden of love, wanting to share more, and you also highlighted on Prem Nam, when we want to surrender to Krishna, we should chant more. And this was really so touching. I wanted to hear this, and
Yes.
you gave it out, and I wanted
Nam
to
is
say thank you so much. Thank you so
Nam
much.
is Krishna, and Krishna in the sweetest aspect of devotion. It's Nam. Hare Krishna. You're adding to your treasure box. I'm taking notes. Okay. Okay, is there anyone else like to make a comment or question? Ram Leela, is it?
No, Ram Hari.
Ram Hari.
Because I love reading Hari's books about this one.
Yeah, you have a voice just like I agree. That your voice sounds very similar. I know how I do Hari.
Okay.
I love his books, and I was wondering this episode just saw this. Is that one of his books or is it the episode?
No, he made that statement. And he said to Prabhupada, and it was recorded, that, this is the dream I had.
You know when?
Well, Prabhupada was here at the time, so.
No, I mean, like,
it was a long time ago.
you know exactly.
What he told Prabhupada, I can't really say. It's a pastime we hear. He would ask Prabhupada questions a lot. It's like, when you get married, of course, one of the four regulative principles is no illicit sex. So sex in marriage is only for procreation of children. So Prabhupada gave the formula that you can only have sex with your wife once a month, and then when she's pregnant, and then no more sex when the child is born, nothing during the pregnancy, and then 6 months after that, no sex. So he told that to Hayagriva, and Hayagriva said, Prabhupada, what's the use of any of it? Prabhupada said, very good boy. Now you understood. So yeah, that was one of the questions he asked Prabhupada. Another question he asked Prabhupada was, he was kind of like, it was one of the early days, and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I have been chanting Hare Krishna for 1 year, and I don't have love of God. Prabhupada said, oh, 1 year. How long have you been in this material world? How many lives? I got the message. Yeah, so sometimes we think, I've been chanting for a while, and it's nothing much is happening. Just don't give up. Keep chanting. Because in due course of time, Krishna will say, oh, this person really wants me. All right. And then he starts bestowing his mercy. He tests us just to see how serious we are.
Can you say something about what is now situation in New Vrindavan? Any devotees there or temple, this beautiful temple there?
The Palace of Gold.
Palace of Gold is
Yeah.
good, yeah.
I saw this many videos about Prabhupada. He was there.
Yeah.
This was nice atmosphere. I don't know what is the situation now. Is still there devotees?
Oh, yeah. In fact, that Palace of Gold, one very senior devotee gave $100,000, and we used all of that money to fix the temple up again because, over the years, things deteriorate. So yeah, that's looking good again. One story when Prabhupada was walking with his devotees, this was before this Prabhupada said, if you build my palace, I'll come and live. We told that the devotees in Vrindavan. So this was just before the palace was finished. So Prabhupada's going through, there's still a construction site in many places. So the leader of the community, Kirtan, said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, when we finish your palace, we'll decorate it all with jewels. And Prabhupada pointed to his devotees, he said, these are my jewels. And referring to all the devotees, all the devotees were, yeah, so that's nice. Prabhupada saw that his devotees were really dear to him. That's Prabhupada. It's a nice story. But yeah, have you been there?
No.
It's actually, the community is actually growing nicely. Prabhupada came 1968, 69, 70, 72, 74, 76. I saw him when he came in 76. I think that was the other thing I saw. He came in 74, but I missed it. I was there. 74 was. Yeah, that's where I started. You never know.
I think I saw one photos of you. You were very, very young when you were in the Vrindavan.
You were skinny too.
You look like boy. You look like boy. Very nice
No, an old boy. Yeah, I used to cook. Nobody liked my cooking. I used to cook for the Brahmacharis. The Brahmacharis would cook. You can't eat when he cooks, it's too austere, you know. We didn't have much. I cooked the same vegetable every day for lunch. Same one. Cauliflower. Oh, it was two vegetables, cauliflower and potatoes, eggplant and tomatoes. So sometimes you put peas in the cauliflower and potato one. Sometimes bell pepper in the eggplant and tomato one. And that was it. It's the only two vegetables I ever learned. And then I said that to one senior devotee who was there. He said, yeah, that was natural because that's the only vegetables we had. We never had anything else. We were quite poor. Money was like very scarce. But life was simple. It was really simple. There was no toilets in the buildings. Everything was outside all year round. And that's a cold climate. Anyway, those days were when you're young, you know, you think you can do anything when you're young. And we felt like that too. We didn't mind the difficulties. It was like an adventure. The harder it was, the more we enjoyed it. We liked the austerity. We had no hot water. We had two faucets. One was cold and the other was colder. And the water was from an underground stream. So during the winter time, that water was pinching cold. Because it was coming from underground during the winter time. Really cold. In the summertime, it was cool. But we had no hot water. And we used to bathe outside. When I first got there, we had an open little, we call it a gap. And we would just take these milk cartons and cut them off at the top and make them scoop the water and throw it over us and then run. And sometimes you would scoop ice up there with a little water and you get hit in the head with a piece of ice. It was really wild. And we had no money, but life was fun. I had one dhoti, you wash it every evening and the next day you wear it again. I would do you. I wished you were there. You would have really enjoyed it. It's just perfect. Yeah, we had nothing. At one time, for about 9 years, I saw no money, no television. Of course, there was no cell phones in those days. No phones, no money, no television, no radio, nothing. Zero. It was funny. I was with Radhanath Maharaj. We were both together. So he went out preaching after so many years. He's in a high school and he's preaching. This was in the later part of the 1970s. So he's preaching to the college students, the high school students. He's saying to them, you know, you have to be careful when you graduate high school. Then President Nixon might bring you into the draft and send you to Vietnam. So at the end of the talk, one student raises his hand and says, excuse me, sir, but President Nixon's not the president. And the Vietnam War has been over for 5 years. I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't know who was president. It was like a historical blackout. But we didn't care. No phones, nothing. That's the best. If somebody wanted, the community had one phone, and that was in the main place. And the community was big, it was devotees in 3 different places. So sometimes a phone call would come for some devotee, and then they would have to find him. And usually they could never find him, and the person would hang up on him. It was wild. I was living in a brahmachari ashram, which is brahmachari, so there was no ladies there. And for 2.5 months, I didn't see one lady. And one lady came up and said, yeah, it's another species. I remember that, yeah, I remember something. Yeah, so life was like quite strange. We were living in seclusion. One time, Radhanath Swami, he was awesome. He was even more secluded than I was. So one time, he was giving a class and he said, in 2 years, I saw 4 women. Radharani, Tulsi, Subhadra, and cow. Yeah, we were quite secluded life. All we had was the deities and our service, and so living in the woods. And I remember I was with Radhanath Maharaj in Italy. It was Radhastami. It was like maybe the year 2000, something like that. So we're sitting there and Prabhupada Dash in Italy. So So he turned to me and he said, did you ever think we would be living like this, flying in airplanes, and having credit cards and going from place to place when we were back in the old Luhundala? I said, never thought of it. Inconceivable. We thought life in the woods was all, that was it.
Is there anyone else, Maharaj, that you and Radha Swami that came out from the Brahmachari ashram?
Alive? Not many. Not many. No, he wasn't there. No. He would visit us, but he wasn't. No, no, just the two of us made it. Somehow. I guess we made it in one way, in some sense. To the Brahmachari, who was the leader of Brahmachari, he was really very good looking, intelligent, very attractive, and he had all good qualities. And so one lady wanted to marry him. And he didn't want to get married. When she was praying, she would go every day to the altar. I would watch her, and she'd sit in front of the deities praying for her husband. And so he found out that she was, her prayers were about him. So he was thinking, and I guess he had some little concern. He was thinking, should I stay Brahmachari or should I get married? So he didn't know what to do. He was asking different devotees. So he decided to make a little test. So we had a lake. We built a man-made lake across the street from that. And then we put a raft, you know what a raft is, right? It floats in the water in the middle of the lake. So he decided to make a test to see whether to get married or stay Brahmachari. So he said, I'm going to go sleep on the raft. I'm going to go take rest. And if I wake up on the east side of the lake, I'll stay Brahmachari. And if I wake up on the west side of the lake, I'll become Grihastha. Because, the wind would move the raft. So he fell asleep and he woke up like 2:30 in the morning. No, it was actually earlier, 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said, it was on the east side. And he thought, it's too early to get up. So he went back to sleep. Guess what? You guessed it. He woke up on the west side. Swaha. Swaha. She was a nice lady, and they had nice kids. So it's quite successful marriage.
It doesn't matter.
Huh?
If the person is sincere, it doesn't matter. If the person is sincere in Krishna consciousness.
Doesn't matter. Kriyetako, monetako, sadhari, doesn't matter what ashram you're in. The important thing is whether you chant the holy names. Whether you're a Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas, Brahmachari, still have to chant the holy names. Yeah, Bhakti Vinota first things. Kriyetako, monetako, sadhari, volidako. So,
Yeah, the beginning like Jai Guru
Yeah, Jai Guru, Jai Guru Madhu Sware, Jai Guru Madhu Sware. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
As soon as you have opened the door to moving down, and then they'll all of a sudden start speaking things. There was another thing where the prasadam was very austere, extremely austere. And so, but the devotees would get a really nice maha. But the maha would only be distributed to the devotees for breakfast. And then they would keep it in what they call this maha cabinet. And it would be a padlock on it. And nobody could get to the cabinet until it was time for breakfast the next morning when they would distribute it. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. And so devotees wanted maha, so they would try to figure ways to break into the maha cabinet and steal maha. So it became a problem. We'd break the lock and steal and get into the maha cabinet and steal maha. And maha was nice. But our regular prasadam was pretty austere. In the morning we just have oats cooked in water with a little bit of dates in there to give us some sweetness. With the maha, and then lunch was dal, but we didn't have dal, we had split peas. And chapatis with no ghee. Rice with no ghee, no salt. That was lunch. In the evening we had popcorn and milk. That's it. Yeah, only at breakfast. And everybody would be ready for breakfast. But if people were stealing the maha, then that means there would be less maha for everybody. So people would become upset, who's stealing the maha. So they made a rule. And anybody who steals maha and gets caught stealing maha has to get married. That was the punishment. And so, every week there was another marriage. And it was good because there was a lot of girls that were waiting for husbands. So. And then they tried to make the maha cabinet even more secure. So the devotees start pulling the bottom of the door and open and stick your hand in the side to grab the maha. So they put nails on the inside. So if you put it in there, it was like agresora. But that didn't discourage the devotees. And so they would steal the whole maha cabinet. So then we got a refrigerator. We put it in the refrigerator and we locked it. But somebody would break the lock on the refrigerator and steal the maha. So then we put chains around the refrigerator, big heavy chains with padlocks. Well, one day somebody stole the whole refrigerator. They took it into the woods. And because we were construction, we had dynamite. So they blew the refrigerator door open with dynamite. Yeah, it's a true story. Oh, if you were there, they would have probably accepted that. So every week somebody was getting, but there was one devotee, he wanted to get married, so he purposely tried to get caught stealing. Because everybody understood his game, so they wouldn't give him any married. So So what they did was they refused him. So, but he kept stealing it. So they thought we have to do something. So there was one lady nobody would marry. In fact, people were afraid to talk to her. She was heavy. So I thought, here's the perfect match. So that was his life. The good old days. They said that to Radha Swami, the good old days, and he said, yes, and we're glad they're gone. It was quite, the point was we had nothing. We hardly even had enough clothes. Any money went to the deities. The deities had nice jewelry, the deities had silken garments, the deities had nice worship. And the devotees, if you needed a pair of boots, because a lot of times when it was muddy there, it was a very muddy area, and we had to work outside, so boots were like in demand. You put in a requisition, and then they would get you some boots, but usually it take a month before you get the boots after you put the requisition. So things were difficult. So many devotees had boots with holes in them. And then the water would get inside. So we would get plastic bags and wrap it around our feet so we could keep it dry while we had to wear our boots. Everybody had plastic bags wrapped around their feet. So it was very, very, there was nothing there. We had very little. And if somebody come, we would say, did you bring any money? And if they would leave, we'd say, can you leave your money? Could you ask your parents to give you some money? And then we would ask them to give the money to the community. We had nothing. It was like that. Everything was really tight. But we had service, so we had Krishna, so the boys were happy. It's not like that anymore. So don't worry. We had nice buildings and guest houses, and you actually get a place to sleep when you go.
I think it's very similar climate like in Centar in Germany. Centar is quite similar.
I never been to Simachal in the winter time. So.
But it's very cold. It's very cold.
Oh, Nubernava was so cold that sometimes the snow would be so high that people would lose horses in the snow. Horses would disappear because the snow was so deep. Yeah. It was really cold. And we did everything by wood. There was no gas heat. Everything was wood. Wood stoves. That's all. We cooked on wood. We heated everything by wood. Everything was done with wood. I was a cook, so I was cooking by wood, and we'd have to go out into the forest and bring in the wood. We weren't allowed to chop trees down because we felt, Prabhupada told us the trees are living entities. So the only wood we would get was if there was broken or dead trees, and we would take those. And in the wintertime, the wood was always wet. So if you try to cook with wet wood, it's like really impossible. So you have to dry it out first. And sometimes you didn't have time to dry it out, you had to cook. So you throw it in there, and then the whole thing would make smoke. And then the whole kitchen would be, they would look into the kitchen to see if I was there, and I was there, they couldn't see me. That wasn't Mara. Is Chandra Molly in there? Maybe. And that would be in there, And the kitchen, we had a particular nickname for the kitchen. It was called the dungeon. It was like this one room in the basement with one window, and that was covered with plastic. And after cooking for a while, I lost my eyesight actually because of the wood and the fire and the smoke. And when I would try to do arti on the altar, I couldn't see the deities because the light from the altar was so bright that I'd be doing the arti like this. So they thought, well, we got to fix Chandramali's eyes. So they brought in an Ayurvedic doctor, first Indian I ever saw. And he came in and he said, oh, yeah, no problem. So he got some honey and he mixed it with warm water. And he said, you put this on the eye, and you close your eye for a half hour. And you do that 2-3 times a day, and your eye will be okay. And it worked. Just honey and water gave my eye, I got my sight back. I actually couldn't see. It was so bad. Yeah. And something was, my eyes were somehow damaged because of the smoke. But it was curable, it wasn't like permanent. There's many other stories, but you don't want to hear them. Breaking the ice and breaking the ground in the winter time, when you had to, take care of nature. You get a shovel and you'd have to dig a hole, but the ground was frozen solid. You'd be smashing a hole at the same time. You have the nature's pushing, It's like, whoa, you're freezing. Yeah, this is all part of the fun. But when you're young, you do anything when you're young. When you get old, you think, my God, I can never do that. Yeah. Young life is adventurous. You just want to try everything. You don't care. What do you think, Sretna Duša? Could you live there?
Who knows?
Probably you would have probably enjoyed it.
I think so.
Be an adventure. But everyone was united around service. That's probably, there was no politics, there was no fighting. Everybody was working to serve the deities and to build a community. That was because Prabhupada kept writing letters, build a community, make it like Vrindavan. Prabhupada was writing letters encouraging us to keep expanding the community. It was, our main service was construction besides deity worship. That's all, it was mostly construction and deity worship. That's all we did. And we had cows too. We took care of cows. Am I keeping everyone too late?
I don't know. I think they are grown up people. They're late.
They're gonna be very well. I should stop anyway. It's 10 minutes. But thank you. Thank you for allowing us to come and take part. I was here 2 years ago? No, 2 years. Well, it was more than 2 years, wasn't it?
Actually, before COVID situation.
It must have been 2019.
Yeah.
Only 3 years, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, when COVID, I remember lockdown began in March of 2020. I was in Zagrebu. And I remember the day And all of a sudden I thought, wow, I finally made it. It's static symptoms. But it was an earthquake. The whole building was shaking. I thought,
In the morning, 7 in the morning. Yeah.
Huh?
About 6:30 in the morning. I
Yeah.
was on job and I was in a skyscraper in 12th floor, yes, and I saw moving half meters left and right, everything, and I hang up on something on the window, and I don't believe it. Left and right half meters, and building is solid. I survived.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. The building I was in was made for earthquakes, so it was pretty strong, but still, the pictures were flying off the walls and smashing.
Yeah, something is falling down, but who cares?
Yeah.
Krishna, Krishna, we sing Hare Krishna, Hare, non-stop. I'm chanting and saw something. I don't know.
Chanting and dancing.
Yes, chanting and dancing. And hanging
Dancing and
my
holding.
window.
Yeah, and then I was with Abadula. He said, "It's an earthquake." I said, "Oh, okay, let's go." We jumped in. We sat in the car. He said, "If you're in the car outside, you're safe." But I didn't believe it. Then we drove to this place. I forget where it was. It was like hundreds of people there. Everybody came to that one place.
Yeah.
It was somewhere near downtown or something, near the city center or something. Yeah. And I had been in that building for 5 years and nothing ever happened. And then I was thinking, what is this? And then right after that, there was every day there was a shake.
Yeah,
For like weeks.
for weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very funny, Maharaj, about this because we would tell in one way, okay, now I go into Slovenia, and when you move into Slovenia, there will be the big earthquake.
I was sitting in Ljubljana, and that's when the earthquake in Katrina.
Yeah.
And it hit Ljubljana too. That's far. That's really far. It was. My room shook a little bit. And I'm thinking, everywhere I go, you know, it's following me. But then I heard it was in Katrina. It was really half the city was destroyed. Okay, thank you. I guess Sundananda has